We continue now at the top of Daf Yomi Gemara and Meseches Megillah. This is Megillah Daf 11a. The Gemara says that Rav Dimi Bar Yitzchak, he used to introduce Megillah Esther with the following drasha. It says, Ki avodem anachnu uve'avduseinu lo azavnu elokeinu vayat oleinu chesed lifnei malchei pras. It says in the pasuk, this is a pasuk in Ezra, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu hasn't forsaken us, and He gave us chesed in front of the kings of Persia. And so he explained, Amosai, when was this? Bisman Haman. This was in the times of Haman. Rashi over here says, Ki avodim anachnu pasuk hu b'sefer Ezra. There's a pasuk in Ezra. B'sefer vayat aleinu chesed lifnei sorei pras lo seis aleinu michya. The end of the pasuk talks about the fact again that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us chesed in front of the kings of Persia, and that's talking about in the times of Haman. There's another girsa over here. Instead of Bisman Haman, it's Bisman Mordechai, but it is the same basic idea. And the Gemara continues, Rabbi Chanina bar Papa pasach lapischa lahaparsha samehacha. Rabbi Chanina bar Papa, he used to introduce the Megillah Esther with the following drasha based on a pasuk in Tehillim. The pasuk says here, Kaftu enesh l'roshenu banu va'eshu v'mayim. It says that we came through fire, we came through water. What is that a reference to? Ba'esh b'mei Nebuchadnezzar harasha. Fire is a reference to Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar used to throw the righteous into the furnace. Uvamayim, and then it says we came in water, we went through water. That's b'mei Paro. That's in the days of Paro. Paro would throw the firstborn males into the river, into the water. And finally, the pasuk in Tehillim concludes, "Vatotzienu l'rvoya," you took us out in abundance. B'mei Haman, that's a reference to what was going on at the times of Haman. That's a reference to the feasts that were happening at the beginning of Megillah Esther, which introduced the whole story that happened in the Megillah. The Gemara continues, Rabbi Yochanan pasach lapischa lahaparsha samehacha. Rabbi Yochanan would introduce the parsha of the Megillah from the following pasuk. There's a pasuk also in Tehillim. The pasuk says, "Zochar chasto ve'munaso lebeis Yisrael." He remembers his kindness to the house of Israel. Everybody from all ends of the earth will see the salvation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We understand as follows. When did everybody see as Yeshuas Elokeinu the salvation? Mordechai v'Esther. It's a reference to the days of Mordechai and Esther. And Rashi over here says, because this was something that became publicized to all the nations. There were letters that were sent out throughout the world. And the Gemara continues, Reish Lakish pasach lapischa lahaparsha samehacha. Reish Lakish would introduce this parsha, again Megillah Esther from here, from the following pasuk. This is a pasuk in Mishlei. Pasuk says, Ari noheim v'dov shokek. It's talking about a lion that's roaring, talking about a bear that's hungry. Moshel Roshal Amdal, the wicked rules over the poor nation. And what does that mean? So Ari Nohem ze Nebuchadnezzar harasha. The lion is a reference to Nebuchadnezzar. The Chsiv Bey, because it says about Nebuchadnezzar, the pasuk says, this is in Yirmiyahu, Ola Aryeh misovcho. Talks about a lion, which we say misovcho. It talks about a lion, which we say is a reference to Nebuchadnezzar. Dov Shokek, what is the bear a reference to? Achashverosh. That's a reference to Achashverosh. The Chsiv Bey, because it says about Achashverosh, this is a pasuk in Daniel, it says, Va'arucheva acharei tinyana, acharei sinyana, domyo ledov. Talks about comparing it to a bear. Again, that's a reference to Achashverosh. V'tani Rav Yosef taught Elu Parsiim. It's a reference to the Persians. She'ochlin v'shosin kadov. They eat and they drink as if like a bear eats and drinks. Umisurbolin basar kadov. Also, they have flesh similar to a bear. Umegadlin seir kadov. They also have hair that grows similar to a bear. Ve'ein lahem menucha kadov. And also, they have no rest. They don't rest just like a bear doesn't rest. And so that's a reference, again, that's a reference to Achashverosh. Moshel Rosh is the Haman. Who's this wicked ruler who rules over us? That's Haman. Al Amdal, and who's the poor nation? Elu Yisrael. That's a reference to Klal Yisrael. Shem Dalim min mitzvahs. They were poor from mitzvahs at that time. They didn't have merits, and that's why they were ruled over by the foreign nation. The Gemara continues. Rabbi Lazar pasach lapischa lahat parsha samehacha. Rabbi Lazar would introduce this parsha of the Megillah from the following pasuk. This is a pasuk in Koheles. The pasuk says, "Ba'atzaltayim yimach hamakare uveshiflos yadayim yidlof habayis." It says that the roof sinks in when the people are lazy, and it says if the hands are idle, again the people aren't doing work. That's when you have leaks in the house. And we darshan as follows: Bishvil atzlos shahaya lehem Yisrael. The laziness of Klal Yisrael, it's because of that. Shelo asku b'Torah, because they didn't learn Torah. Naaseh sono shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu mach. So the enemy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's a euphemism. It's a reference to HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. He becomes mach. He becomes poor. That's what the yimach hamakara. That's what it's referring to. Ve'ein mach elo ani. Mach is a reference to poverty. Shenema, like the pasuk says, v'im machu me'erkecha. Again, he doesn't have the money. That's what the pasuk is talking about over there. Ve'in mikra el HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It says yimach hamakara. The Mekara here is a reference to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Where do we see that? Shenemar, like the pasuk says, HaMekara v'mayim al Yosef. It's talking about HaKadosh Baruch Hu in that pasuk as well. That's a pasuk in Tehillim. And so therefore, again, it's saying that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so to speak, becomes poor because of the fact that Klal Yisrael is lazy and they don't learn Torah. And the Gemara continues, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak pasach lapischa lahaparsha samehach. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak would introduce this parsha from here, from the following pasuk. This is a pasuk in Tehillim, Shir Amalos Lulei Hashem Shahayalanu, Yomar No Yisrael Lulei Hashem Shahayalanu Bekum Aleinu Adam. Talks about the fact that an Adam rose against us. So what does it mean? It means Adam velo melech. It means a person rose against us, but he wasn't a king. That's a reference to Haman. And we'll take a look at a few Rashis over here. First, Mesurbelin Melubashin Bebasar. That was the comparison there between the Persians and the bear. The idea was they have a coat of flesh similar to a bear. Nasa Sona Shal HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mach. We said it was a euphemism. HaKadosh Baruch Hu became poor. What does that mean? Kamisha lo haya yachol lo shia. He was poor in the sense that he couldn't save us, so to speak. And Adam velo melech, a person but not a king, Zeh Haman. That's a reference, like we said, to Haman. And the Gemara continues, Rava pasach lapischa lahaparsha samehacha. Rava would introduce this parsha from here, from the following pasuk. And this is a pasuk in Mishlei. It says, Birvos tzadikim yismach ha'am. When there are more tzadikim, the people are happy. But when the wicked is ruling, that's when the people groan, that's where they're unhappy. And so the Gemara explains, Bervos tzadikim yismacham. What's the reference? When there are many tzadikim, the people are happy. Is that Mordechai v'Esther? That's a reference to Mordechai v'Esther. Techsiv, like the pasuk says, Vayir Shushan, Tzahalav v'Samecha. It says the city of Shushan, they were rejoicing. But the Gemara continues, Uvimishol Rasha Yeyanacham. But again, when the wicked rules, that's when the people groan, that's when they're upset. Zeh Haman, that's a reference to Haman. Techsiv, like the pasuk says, Vayir Shushan Navocha, that the city of Shushan was perplexed. They were upset at the edicts coming from Haman. And the Gemara continues, Rav Masna Amar Mehacha. Rav Masna used to introduce from here, from the following pasuk. The pasuk says, Kimi goy gadol asher lo elokim krovim elav. Which nation is so great that God is close? And that's a reference also to the times of Mordechai and Esther. Rav Ashi Amar Mehacha. Rav Ashi says from here, from the following pasuk, O Hanisa elokim v'gomer. That pasuk is talking about when they save one nation from within another nation, talking about the fact again that the Jews were saved in the times of Mordechai and Esther. And the Gemara continues, and we should note over here that this next line is a little bit out of place, and the Gra moves it a little bit further down, and the Gemara will note it when we get there. But in any case, the Gemara says, Vayihi b'mei Achashverosh, it was in the days of Achashverosh. Amar Rav, Rav says, Vay vohei, it means to say woe and mourning. It's like a double language of mourning in the days of Achashverosh. Hadad dechsiv, that's what it means when it says in the pasuk, Vismakartem sham lo yivecha la'avodim v'lishvachos. It means that you're going to be sold to your enemies to be servants and to be maidservants. Ve'ein konen, no one's going to buy you. It's also like a double situation where you're going to be sold as servants. That's one thing, but then it gets even worse. There's no one around to buy you. And the Gemara continues with Shmuel Amar, and Shmuel says, now the Gemara returns to the introductions we give to Megillah Esther. Lo ma'astim v'lo ga'altim l'chalosam. It means that I haven't despised them, and I haven't gotten rid of them, destroyed the Jewish people, even in a situation of when they're sinning. What does that mean? Lo ma'astim b'mei Yevonim. It means I haven't despised them. That's talking about in the days of the Greeks. They were saved in the times of the Yevonim. V'lo ga'altim b'mei Nebuchadnezzar. V'lo ga'altim is referring to the days of Nebuchadnezzar, again when they were saved. L'chalosam b'mei Haman. I haven't destroyed them. That's in the days of Haman. L'hafer I haven't gone back on the covenant with them. Bimei Parsiim, that's in the days of the Persians. Ki ani Hashem Elokeim bimei Gog u'Magog. In the last part of the pasuk, that's talking about the days of the wars of Gog u'Magog. B'masnisa Ton in the Braisa was taught as follows: Lo ma'astim b'mei kasdim. Lo ma'astim is referring to the times that they were with the kasdim. Shemarti lahem Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, v'Azariah. That's the times when Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, v'Azariah they came. They helped out. They saved the Jewish people. V'lo ga'altim b'mei Yevonim. V'lo ga'altim is a reference to the times of the Greeks. Shemarti lahem Shimon HaTzadik, v'Chashmonoy u'Vonov u'Matisyahu Kohen Gadol. In the times of the Greeks, there was Shimon HaTzadik, there was the Chashmonoim and the children and their children, and there was also Matisyahu Kohen Gadol. And l'chalosam, what is that a reference to? B'mei Haman. That's a reference to the days of Haman. Shemarti lahem Mordechai v'Esther. That because Mordechai and Esther, they're the ones that HaKadosh Baruch Hu set up to help save the Jewish people. Lahafer brisi itam b'mei Parsiim. Lahafer brisi is a reference to the days of the Persians. Shemarti lahem shel beis Rebbe v'chachmei doros. That's the time that I established for them the house of Rebbe and the wise people of the generations. Ki ani Hashem Elokeim, because I am Hashem. Lo asid lavo. That's a reference to the future. She'ein kol umma v'loshen yichol lishlot b'hem. The nations will not be able to rule over the Jewish people in the future. And the Gemara continues, Rabbi Levi Yomer, Rabbi Levi says, Mehacha, from here, from the following pasuk, he would introduce the Megillah Esther. Vim lo so rishu es yoshvei aretz, if you don't drive out the people of the land. And Rashi over here explains, Vim lo so rishu af elu nenshu al shecham al Shaul al Amalek. This whole thing happened in terms of the Megillah Esther. Why? Because Shaul had mercy on Amalek, since Amalek wasn't totally destroyed. So Haman, as we know, is a descendant from Amalek, and that's why this tragedy ensued. And the Gemara continues, Rabbi Chia Amar, Rabbi Chia says, Mehacha, from here, from the following pasuk, V'hoya kasher dimisi lasos lohem es elochem. The idea of that pasuk is that which I was going to do to the enemies of the Jews, it's going to be to the Jewish people if the Jewish people sin. And again, that's a reference to the story of Purim, when the Jewish people were committing Averis, and they were chayiv this destruction. And the Gemara continues in Darshans again from Megillah Esther. This is the area where the Gra moved that line, because this also is a drasha in terms of darshaning the actual psukim from the Megillah. So the pasuk says Achashverosh. Why is he called Achashverosh? Amar Rav says Achiv shel Rosh uven Gilo shel Rosh. He was the brother of a head, and he was Ben Gilo, means the same mazel as another leader. Who is that talking about? Achiv shel Rosh means Achiv shel Nebuchadnezzar Rosh. It means he was a brother. He was similar to Nebuchadnezzar the wicked. Shenikra Rosh. Nebuchadnezzar was called Rosh. Shenemar, like it says in the pasuk, Antu Reisha di Dahava. It says exactly that language, that again he was considered to be a Rosh. And the Gemara continues, Ben Gilo shel Rosh. He was also the same mazel as Nebuchadnezzar. Who harag, who bikesh la'arog, Nebuchadnezzar killed. Achashverosh sought to kill. Who hechriv, Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. Who bikesh lahachriv, he wanted to destroy the Beis HaMikdash. Shenemar, like the pasuk says, Uva malchus Achashverosh, betchilas malchuso, kosvu sitna al yoshvei Yehuda v'Yerushalayim. It says that Achashverosh, he tried to stop the building of the Beis HaMikdash, of the second Beis HaMikdash that was taking place. As Rashi over here explains, bikesh lahachriv, he sought to destroy Yesod sheyosad Zerubbabel beBeis HaMikdash. Zerubbabel, he made a foundation for the building of the second Beis HaMikdash. That's what Achashverosh wanted to destroy. Bimei Koresh, that happened in the days of Koresh. Lefnei Achashverosh, that happened before Achashverosh. K'moshe Amar b'Sefer Ezra, like it says in Sefer Ezra. Pasuk says again, Sitna shenimne l'satan lahem shelo yivnu. He was like a satan. He was like against them, an adversary that they shouldn't be able to build the second Beis HaMikdash. And the Gemara continues with Shmuel Amar, and Shmuel says another reason why he's called Achashverosh, shehushchuru pneim shel Yisrael biyamav, because the faces of Klal Yisrael were blackened during his days, keshulei kedera, like the bottom of a pot. The Gemara continues with Rabbi Yochanan Amar, and Rabbi Yochanan says Kol shezochro. The reason why it's called Achashverosh is because anyone who mentions him, Amar ach l'rosho, he says woe is to his head. Rabbi Chanina Amar, Rabbi Chanina says Shakol nasu roshin biyamav, that everyone became poor during his time. Shenamar, like the pasuk says, Vayosem hamelech Achashverosh mas. It says that the king Achashverosh, he placed a tax upon the people. Hu Achashverosh, the pasuk says he is Achashverosh. Hu berisho mitchiloso v'yatsofa, means to say the word hu means that he was wicked from his beginning until his end. And the Gemara continues with similar drashos. Hu Esav, hu berisho mitchiloso v'yatsofa. It also says he was Esav. It means from the beginning until the end he was wicked. Hu dasan v'aviram. It also uses that language by dasan and aviram. Hein berishon, they were wicked mitchilosan v'yatsofa, from their beginning until their end. Hu HaMelech Achaz, same thing with the king Achaz. Hu berisho mitchiloso v'yatsofu. He was wicked from his beginning until the end. Avram, hu Avraham. By Avram, it says also a similar language. Hu betzidko mitchiloso v'yatsofu. That means to say that he was righteous from his beginning until his end. Hu Aaron u Moshe. Same thing by Aaron and Moshe. Hein betzidkon, they were righteous mitchiloson v'yatsofon, from the beginning until the end. David hu hakatan, hu bekatnuso mitchiloso v'yatsofon. Now by David it says hu hakatan, he was like the youngest, the smallest. That means to say that he was from the beginning to the end, he was humble. Keshem shebekatnuso hikten atzmo, just like when he was younger, he made himself small. Eitzel misha gadol mimenu b'Torah, by somebody who was greater than him in Torah. Kach b'malchus, so the same thing was true when he was king. Hikten atzmo eitzel misha gadol mimenu b'chachma. He lowered himself in front of someone who was greater than him when it came to wisdom. Hamolech, then it talked about the fact that Achashverosh was the ruler, was the king. Amar Rav says Shamolach me'atzmo, he became king on his own. He was able to secure the throne by himself. Amri lo l'shevach v'amri lo l'gnai. Some people say this is a praise of his, and some people say it's something that's a criticism. Amri lo l'shevach, some people say it's a praise. Nobody was really fit to be king as much as him. He was able, even though he didn't inherit the throne, he was able to take the throne. V'amri lo l'gnai, but some people say it's a gnai, it's like a criticism. He really wasn't fit for the kingship. He gave a lot of money, and that's how he became the king. It then says that he ruled from Hodu until Cush. Rav Shmuel. This is a machlokas between Rav and Shmuel. Chad amar Hodu besofa olam, v'Kush besofa olam. One says Hodu is at one end of the world and Kush is at the other end of the world. He ruled the whole world. V'chad amar, the other one says Hodu v'Kush gabe hadodi havekaimi. That Hodu and Kush were actually very close to each other. Kashem shamalach al Hodu v'Kush, just like he was able to be king and rule over Hodu and Kush. They were in a geographical location near each other, it was easy to rule over them. Kach molach misofa olam v'yad sofo. So too, with that same power, he was able to rule over the entire world. Kayotze b'davar ha'tomer, we have a similar kind of drasha. It says in the pasuk, Yorod b'chol ever hanor mitifsach v'araza. It says the same thing. It says that he ruled over from Tifsach until Aza. And that's a reference to Shlomo HaMelech, and the Gemara continues along the same lines. Rav Shmuel, it's a machlokus between Rav and Shmuel. Chad amar Tifsach b'sofa olam v'yazu b'sofa olam. One says Tifsach is at one end of the world, Az at the other end of the world. V'chad amar Tifsach v'yazu b'hadi hadodi havekaimi. The other one says that they were near each other. Keshem shemalach al Tifsach v'al Aza kach malach al kol olam kulo. Just like he ruled over Tifsach and Aza, which were close to each other, easy to rule over, so too he ruled over the entire world. And the pasuk in the Megillah continues, Sheva v'yesrim u'meya Medina. It says he ruled over 127 Medinos. Amar Rav Chisda says, B'tchila malach al Sheva. Originally he ruled over 7. Ulevasof malach al Esrim. Then he ruled over 20. Ulevasof malach al Meya. And then he ruled over 100. That's how you understand the pasuk, Sheva v'yesrim u'meya Medina. But the Gemara says, Elameata, but if you make the drush in that fashion, Ushnei chaye Amram, it says that the years of the life of Amram were Sheva u'shloshim u'ma'ashon. It says 7 and 30 and 100 years, 137 years. My darasht be. So what are you going to darshan over there? It's the same kind of formulation. You can't make a similar drasha. And so the Gemara says, no, Shani Hach, it's different over here. Dekra Yeseiruhu, because here that's actually an extra pasuk we're darshaning. Michti ksiv me Hodu v'yad Kush. It already says, let us see, it already says that he ruled from Hodu until Kush. Sheva v'yesrim u'meya Medina lamali. What do you need to say? 127 Medinos for? Shmami no lidrasha. You see that the extra word, that's for a drasha. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Tanu Rabbanon, the rabbis taught, Shlosha malchu bekipa. There were 3 individuals who ruled over the entire world. Ve'elohein, and they are as follows. Achav, Achashverosh, and Nebuchadnezzar. Achav, Achashverosh, and Nebuchadnezzar. Achav dechsiv Chai Hashem Elokechem yesh goyim amlocha asher lo shalach Adoni sham levakeshcha. It says, by the life of Hashem, there's no nation where my master, referring to Achav, has not sent out to try to find you. Talking about trying to find Eliyahu Hanavi. V'lo to have a molech alayu. Now he wasn't king over all these areas. Hechi motzi mishpalu. How did he make such an oath? The only way he's able to search everywhere is because he's king over everything. Nebuchadnezzar dechsiv Nebuchadnezzar, because the pasuk says v'haya hagoy v'hamamlocha asher lo yiten es savora ba'ol melech Bavel. It will be the nation and the kingdom that did not put its neck in the yoke of the king of Bavel, indicating again that Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Bavel, ruled everywhere over the entire world. Achashverosh hadi Amron, and finally the Gemara says Achashverosh. That's like we said above, that Achashverosh ruled over the entire world, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Yud Aleph Amud Beis.